Every great marketer has been faced with this moment, an opportunity to exhibit bravery in the midst of uncertainty, or to take a risk on something they truly believed in. The Brave Marketer podcast features today's most progressive marketers and uncovers the brave marketing moments that have shaped their careers and the brands they've influenced. Hosted by Brave Software and Never Stop Marketing, and me, your host, Donnie DeVoren. Together we'll discover the decision-making process and mindset work that led to their success. Welcome to another episode of the Brave Marketer podcast. I think you'll be really fascinated by this one if you're a marketer for a smaller size business or if you're an inspiring entrepreneur. But before we hop into today's session, we want to highlight our Brave Pick of the Week. So every episode, we choose a brand that has run a campaign on the Brave Ads platform. And today we're picking Rokujin, which ran in Japan as part of their brand awareness campaign. Brave is pretty global, and you can run in nearly every country across the world. So in this week's episode, you'll meet Kevin Rose. He's a serial entrepreneur and technology investor. He's been on the cover of Inc. magazine, BusinessWeek, RedHerring. He was named top 25 angel investor by Bloomberg, top 25 web celebrity by Forbes, a top 35 innovator by MIT, and in the top 25 most influential people on the web by Time and BusinessWeek magazines. Kevin currently works as a partner at True Ventures, a venture capital firm that invests in early stage technology startups. To date, True has helped more than 300 companies launch and scale their businesses. Prior to joining True Ventures, Kevin founded Digg, Revision 3, and most recently Zero, an app for tracking intermittent fasting. The podcast series is brought to you by Brave, the world's first global ad platform built on privacy. A fun fact about our Brave Ads platform is that we just crossed over 10 million DAU, daily active users, with nearly 30 million MAU, monthly active users. We're on a tear. So now for today's episode of The Brave Marketer. Today we have Kevin Rose. Kevin, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Doing great, Donnie. Thanks for having me. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. So you've been up to a lot recently, and you're actually a podcaster yourself. And you told me when we spoke earlier that you have a new podcast coming out. Can you tell the audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, I just launched a new show called Modern Finance. And yeah, it's a brand new show focused all things crypto and basically saying, okay, there's enough traditional finance shows out there, but how do we bring everyone up to speed on all of the crazy things that are happening in the rewriting of the financial stack? Basically, blockchain technology is being applied to all different aspects of finance. And I want to make that really easy for people to understand. So we talk about some cryptocurrency coins, talk about decentralized finance, we talk about products like Brave. Like there's a lot to cover on the show, but in a way that an average consumer can understand versus it being just for geeks. You can find it at modern.finance.
How many episodes have come out so far?
We've had 5 or so far. We're publishing 1 new episode per week. I'd say the craziest one we've done so far is we had Beeple, which was that guy, the artist that went out and sold that one NFT for $69 million, which was just crazy. And he's just a wild, fun character. So that was a really fun episode to produce.
Yeah, the NFT space has gone crazy. I guess it's the Beanie Babies of the cryptocurrency area, and now it's hit center stage on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those things where it is a very exciting technology, meaning like the idea of the tech behind NFTs and digital ownership managed on the blockchain is a beautiful thing. Of course, everyone has access to publish anything they want to the blockchain. So anyone with Photoshop or Microsoft Paint or whatever you want to use, you can make an NFT. So there's going to be a ton of stuff out there, but like anything else, you're going to have to sort through it, find the best projects, find the pieces that really mean something to you. And I think that there will be a lot of great art on there that would be very collectible long term, but certainly feels a little bubbly right now. There's a lot of hype around it, but I'm more of a fan of some of the older projects that kick things off, like the CryptoPunks and some of those that happened several years ago.
Yeah, the Crypto Kitties out of Dapper Labs. Yeah, those were all the rage a few years ago.
That's right.
Cool. So let's get into the actual show content. So obviously this is the Brave Marketer, where we're talking to marketers about their brave moment in either in their personal life or in their career, where they really took a risk and had a big reward. You are not a traditional marketer, but you've done a lot of different startups and a lot of untraditional things. So we actually have two stories that you're going to share with us. So why don't you share the first more comical story?
Yeah, this is the one that sadly, a lot of people always joke with me and say this will be what you're probably best known for in your career. But the funny one was when one night I came home late at night, I let my dog out to the backyard to do his business before we go to bed. And I heard him just screeching in pain, like something was wrong. And I looked outside and there was a raccoon that was attacking him. And so I ran down the stairs and just without thinking, jumped in, grabbed the raccoon, threw him off my dog, and then got my dog to come back upstairs. And we were checking him. He was all cut up, and it was really a scary moment. I forgot. It wasn't until several hours later I was like, oh my God, like we have cameras outside. We probably caught this on camera. And so we pulled it up, my wife and I, and we were like, oh my God, there's a video of me taking and lifting this raccoon over my head and throwing it down a flight of stairs. And I posted it on YouTube the next day. It went viral. I think the first day it hit 4 or 5 million views. It was on CNN. It was just like all over the place. And then it went viral on all the other social platforms as well. So, it's in the double-digit millions of views. And it's funny when I meet with entrepreneurs, because I'm a venture capitalist, like oftentimes one of the topics that always comes up, we're very serious talking about fundraising and funding their business and how we can be helpful. And then all of a sudden the raccoon video tends to resurface. So it's definitely a brave moment. I don't know that really applies on the marketing side, but it's like your dog is family. It's like something that you love so much. And I knew that this thing wasn't going to kill me. So I just jumped in, and thankfully I did not get rabies. So.
Nice. And how could the audience find that video if they Googled it?
Yeah, if they just go and type in Kevin Rose raccoon toss, it'll be one of the first ones. It's pretty ridiculous.
Got it. That's a funny story. We'll definitely check that out. So why don't we get into the more serious one? You want to talk about your time that you quit being a TV host gig?
Yeah, I'd been tinkering with little side projects for a very long time, just building little things. I was a software engineer. I went to school for that. And I just happened to fall into the role, very, very fortunate role of being a television host on a network called Tech TV, which is a nationally broadcast network. And we actually had some international countries as well. It was a great job. My family was very proud of me. I was kind of on air live every day, Monday through Friday. And it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. But at the same time, in the back of my mind, I had this feeling like, wow, there's these new technologies that are coming online that are allowing us to build web apps in a kind of more non-traditional way, meaning like the technologies were and tech stacks were getting easier. It was possible to launch your own website from your home versus having to go and actually rack your own servers in some warehouse somewhere. So a lot of things came together where I thought, gosh, like there's a little bit of social movement here. People are starting to do things socially on the web. And I had this idea for Digg, and Digg was the very first social news website. We were about, 6 months before Reddit came out. And we were the largest social news site for about 5 years or so. And I just had this idea that it kept hitting me where I'd get up in the middle of the night and I kept thinking about it. I'm like, somebody needs to go build this. Someone needs to make a way for people to have a say and vote on content. Like that hadn't been done on the web yet. There was no Facebook like button. And so I just decided one day it's time to go and do this, because why not roll the dice? You only live once, and let's take on some risk here. And I quit my job. My family thought I was nuts. Like, why are you going to leave this great on TV gig that was paying really decently and to go do a startup? Like, what is that all about? So I had a kind of friend that I'd gone and hired to prototype it out and get it off the ground. And we launched it, and I was still at the company. And so I went on air and actually launched it on Tech TV as I was on my way out, and said, hey, if you would like to check out this new, I'm calling it a social news site. And then we had a few thousand people, and those few thousand people turned into tens of thousands. And then at its peak, we were doing 38 or so million monthly unique visitors, which was crazy. But there was that moment where I just really had to decide this is something that I believe needs to exist and No one else is building it, so why shouldn't it be me? And what's the worst case? The worst case scenario is that it fails. My family was really good at this, in that my dad had started a handful of different companies, and a lot of them failed. And he had a couple ones that were decent, small to medium-sized businesses. And one of the things that I learned through that process was that you always learn something from your failures, and failures are really just admitting that you've learned something new and adding to your depth of knowledge in the next thing that you try. And so it was that kind of framework that I was able to put into my mind, or my parents were able to put that in my mind, where I really didn't have the fear, because I always just knew, worst case, I could just go and try the next thing. And I don't know, that was baked into me as an entrepreneur. And so that's led me then to go off and probably started close to a dozen businesses now. And most of them have been failures, but several of them have been very massive companies that are doing quite well. I always look at it through that lens. There's really not a whole lot to lose. As long as I have a place to sleep at night, things will be okay.
Yeah, it seems like you have it in your DNA to go and fail fast and try something new, and it's okay. What would you say to the person who maybe has some family responsibility or whatever it may be, but they do have that burning idea? What advice would you give?
It's a great question. This happens to me a lot. I'll go to a conference and give a talk, and then afterwards I go out and people will come up and ask questions and things like that. And there's a couple things. I would say, one, never look for outside validation. So one of the things that is common is people will come up to me at a conference, and when we could do those things back in the day, and they will come up and they'll say, "Hey, what do you think of my idea? Will this work?" And I've had so many investors and friends that when I was launching Digg for the first time, they were just like, "What is this? No, this is not good." And that's normal, because when something is new and novel and the world hasn't seen it before, it's always going to seem odd at first. So if you can think of any really big game-changing technologies that we've had launch, it would just seem, even e-commerce when it first got off the ground, like, you're going to trust your credit card on the web? No way. That was so many years ago, but that was the thinking back then. Or cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. What is this thing? Like, it's not digital cash. There's no value here. That's always the case. Tesla, the list goes on and on. So don't look for outside validation from third parties. Trust your own gut. Like, at the end of the day, go with your gut. And if you have responsibilities like a family and things like that, I totally get that. I have a couple little girls now, and it would be a lot tougher. But you can do little small tests. Like when I first launched Digg, I went out and said, okay, listen, I have $10,000 to go build this, and I'm going to go find a contractor that's going to work with me on the code, and I'm going to launch something in a very small way, meaning the temptation is to go and boil the ocean. So you say, oh, I've got this big laundry list of features, and wouldn't it be great if it did these 15 different things? But in reality, most entrepreneurs, they get really excited about their idea, and they create this big, long list of things, and it's going to take them a year or two to go build it and test it. But you really only need that core, the very first version. If it's totally polished, like, you've waited too long to launch. I think Reid Hoffman was one of the first people to say that from LinkedIn. And he's totally right. I mean, you need to have a very raw, rough idea. Pick the 2 or 3 things that you think are different and unique enough to get people excited to use the product. Go build those in a lightweight manner and launch it on the side. This word's overused, but the quote unquote side hustle, and get it out there. And you'll know very quickly, you'll be getting 2 very important pieces of data. One, always solicit feedback directly from your users, not in a group setting, but individually, so there's not groupthink. And then 2, make sure you properly instrument and measure everything on your product, so you understand what people are using and what they're liking and what they're enjoying. And so you can figure out what to double down on or refine or you actually delete. Like, a lot of the process of this is being honest with yourself of what doesn't work and cutting out those features and functionality and trying something new, and not being afraid to pivot. And if you think that there's still a seed of an idea there, go and try a slightly different version of it or reboot it altogether. I've seen this so many times, whether it be the early Twitter days. Like, I remember when Ev and them, they were working on a podcasting app, and that didn't work. And so they were like, let's try this Twitter thing. And that was the next app that they built. And the same thing goes with Stuart. I remember when he was building the game Never Ending, and then he was like, this isn't really working. It's a fun little game. But you know what? We're using this fun little IRC app type thing that we built, and we're going to call it Slack. And then it became Slack. So it's very common for entrepreneurs. You always hear like, oh, wow, you've built Slack or you've built built Twitter, multi-billion-dollar business. Like, you're so brilliant. But in reality, behind the scenes, when you talk to all these people, the progress is never like up into the straight line up and to the right. Like, the journey as an entrepreneur is very much a roller coaster. There's loop-de-loops. There's all kinds of things that go through it. And don't be afraid to to pivot and change and adapt to get to where you want to be.
Yeah, I totally hear you. And that's great advice for entrepreneurs or people who want to start something on the side, as you call it, the side hustle. So let's say you're out there, you start the new app, you start the new company, you're getting some traction, maybe not as much traction as you would like, or you really want to grow it. Put yourself in the marketer seat for a second, Kevin. So any things that you've done that are brave more on the marketing side of the house?
Oh, absolutely. Like, the marketing side is what I love. The thing is, you have to go out and when you're launching any new product, I always believe that the cheapest way to gain traction is to have a product that people love and get that natural word of mouth thing going. So one thing I do is I actually pause all marketing until I'm sure that I somewhat have some product market fit. So I'm not going to go out and blow $500,000 on advertising a new product unless I know that there's some organic uplift that's happening and that the product is actually working initially, because otherwise you're just throwing away money. But once I can guarantee that is actually happening, probably best example is the most recent app I built called Zero, which is an intermittent fasting app. It took us the first year or so until we really nailed the product to where month over month, we were doubling in size and it was really starting to work. We said, okay, we know that when people land here, they're enjoying it. Now, how can we amplify that effect? And there's a lot of traditional ways that we all know, like the Facebooks and the Instagrams and all the things, the ad buys that you can do and how you can measure and track all that stuff. But a lot of those channels are really saturated. They're just there's a lot of big VC dollars. So when you go look in the health and fitness category, for example, if you have a Headspace and a Calm and a few others that are very well capitalized, they can afford to go out and acquire customers at not even at break even or even at a loss. But as a small startup, you really shouldn't be playing that game. You got to get scrappy. So, I have a lot of entrepreneurs that I work with, and we'll go out and we'll say, okay, how can we hire someone, oftentimes part-time, to go make us a list of the top 50 influencers on YouTube or TikTok that are talking about health and fitness? So back comes a list of those people. Then you have a low-level BD person go out and start pinging them individually and working out and signing very small micro deals that may scale over time, but getting them to come out and with their own authentic voice and tone say, this is why I like this product. So it's not an advertising. It is very organic. And then going and measuring that and watching the delta and bumps when you turn those campaigns live, meaning I did a campaign with this person. We know our average downloads per day is 25,000, and we bumped up to 30,000 on the day where we ran that campaign. Because a lot of these are word of mouth or audio, so it's not very easy to do attribution. It's getting really scrappy and doing a lot of guerrilla marketing, sponsoring newsletters, sponsoring other podcasts, smaller podcasts, rather than go out and sponsor Joe Rogan and spend $100,000, which might be great for some of the bigger established brands. How can I go out and find 100 mini Joe Rogans and pay $500 an ad spot or less? It's more work, but it's how you have to get scrappy as a small startup.
Totally. So shifting into, some more generalized questions, what do you think is the biggest threat and then opportunity in the marketing space right now?
Well, the biggest opportunity is definitely figuring out how to work with influencers in a thoughtful way, that it doesn't feel forced. And so that means a lot more hand-holding up front, meaning it's not just about, hey, we've agreed to do a deal. Here's the copy I want you to read. It's actually, yes, we'll do this deal, but let's do a 20-minute call so I can give you a walkthrough of the product. I want you to really create an account. We want to build a long-term relationship here over time so that when that read actually happens, it's coming through in a very authentic voice. I think that's a huge piece of it. Users these days consumers can just tell the difference. The danger, I would say, is really going into these channels that are just unprofitable. We avoid that with all of our startups now on the consumer side. It's just there's so much saturation. And then also we don't know what's going to happen on the Apple front with their changes to tracking here and how that's going to impact the industry and some of the targeting side. So there's a lot up in the air right now. A lot of my startups have really said, we're cutting back on spending on the advertising side right now, focusing more on product and organic growth, and then doing very small, measured targeted buys on emerging networks or with emerging influencers and gauging the success and then figuring out how deep that well is. Like, how far can you spend into that? You may cap out in some of these smaller places where it doesn't make sense to spend $50,000, but it does make sense to spend 10. So it's a lot of trial and error. And it used to be very simple for a CEO or a founder somewhere or just one marketing person to go out and do this. Whereas I feel like you need a team of people rather than just deciding what are the 2 or 3 big spins that we're going to do to market a product. It's let's have a small team put together and figure out what are the 50 to 100 smaller spins we're going to do to market a product.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth because I was literally thinking like it's so easy just to go to Google and do some SEM, go to Facebook and do some buys, same thing on Instagram. You could be a one-man marketing shop and go into the self-serve tools and take care of it yourself. When you're talking about influencers and going really deep, you're right, that actually requires a team. So what you're in a way saying is put the investment more in the personnel on the company side versus some of the media so you can test a lot and see what works. Is that right?
That's right. But it really depends on what product you have to market. When I keep saying our companies, as a venture capitalist at True Ventures, we have over 300 founders there. So I get to interact with a lot of different founders that are finding out different ways to market their products. And we have some companies that are in very unique spaces where Google totally makes sense for them because there's no competition for certain keywords. And they just go in and they enjoy that. They set it up, they run it, and it's very profitable and it works. And yeah, everyone's a little bit different. But I would say I'm more on the consumer side, and especially in hot verticals, it's very important to be a lot more on the scrappier side.
Cool. I'm going to ask you one final question. Can you nominate another brave marketer that we should interview for the show?
Oh boy, I would like to nominate Jack Dorsey. I'd love him to come on the show because he's done such a fantastic job with all the things that he's touched, especially in the early days of Square. Can you get Jack, or how about Elon?
Yeah. Let me just call up Elon. That's an easy one. So good. Well, thank you for coming onto the show. Any closing thoughts for the audience?
No, I think that if you listen to this and hopefully it gave you a little inspiration, and I would say that there's the one thing that for me has been so key has been just getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Just like that fear that comes up when you're doing anything new, when you're doing a bold new campaign, when you're launching a new website design or a new feature or functionality that you're doing, there's always going to be some pushback. And that can be from upper management. It can be from your users because people don't like change. But it's important to take those risks because when they do pay off, they pay off massively. And we live in an environment these days that if you have a successful product, oftentimes it is very comfortable just to keep doing the same. But with the pace of innovation and all these new scrappier entrepreneurs that are coming on the scene, we just know you can't remain static anymore. You always have to be thinking of that next thing, that next idea, how to always sand down the rough edges and make the product even better.
Yeah, that's awesome. And how can the audience get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'd love it if you checked out the podcast around cryptocurrency. It's just the URL is modern.finance. And I'm also at Kevin Rose on Twitter, where I tweet about all things finance, cryptocurrency, entrepreneurship, like you name it, and some random other things that I'm into.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on the show, Kevin. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Donnie.
I hope you liked this episode as much as I liked doing it. I always think it's fascinating to meet with someone like Kevin Rose, who has had so much experience in the entrepreneurial world. And, I talk to a lot of big brand marketers, and we're talking about their display and their video and their programmatic. But it's so nice and refreshing to speak to someone like Kevin, who spent a lot of time talking about how an entrepreneur can market their product and using influencers and hiring out a marketing team and testing a lot of things. So hopefully you enjoyed that as well. And if you did like what you were listening to, please just take 2 minutes and leave us a short review on Apple Podcasts. It would be really, really helpful for more listeners to tune in like you are. And on one final note, if you have a brand, product, or service that you'd like to get in front of Brave's 30 million users, please do send us an email at adsales@brave.com and let us know you're a podcast listener to unlock one of 2 perks. So if your budget is under $10,000 a month, we will bump you up to the top of our self-serve waiting list. And if your budget is over $10,000 a month, you'll qualify for a 25% podcast listener discount. Again, just shoot us an email at adsales@brave.com. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.